On the 20th of July, 1969, 1/6 of the global population stared at glowing cathode ray tube televisions. They watched two blurry, white silhouettes bouncing across a gray desert. Through the heavily degraded static of the broadcast, the lunar surface walk appeared almost playful, a graceful, slow-motion ballet in a low-gravity wonderland. That grainy television feed is the most successful psychological cover-up in the history of space exploration. The reality of stepping onto the lunar surface was not a joyful leap. It was a deeply claustrophobic, sensory-deprived, and physically agonizing ordeal. For exactly 2 hours and 31 minutes, Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin were not merely heroic explorers, they were biological anomalies trapped inside wearable spacecraft, fighting a hostile environment designed to kill them at a moment's notice. Today, utilizing NASA's biomedical logs and declassified extravehicular activity transcripts, we strip away the romance of the Apollo 11 moonwalk. We expose the terrifying optical illusions of the lunar terrain, the suffocating physical constraints of the A7L spacesuit, and the relentless, silent psychological torment of the first men to walk on a dead world.
From the planet Earth, first set foot upon the moon, July 1969, AD. It came in peace.
I guess you're about the only person around that doesn't have TV coverage of the scene.
That's all right, I don't mind a bit. How is the quality of the TV?
Oh, it's beautiful, Mike. It really is.
Oh, geez, that's great. Is the lighting halfway decent?
Yes, indeed. They've got the flag up now, and you can see the stars and stripes.
Before they could even touch the dusty regolith of the Sea of Tranquility, Armstrong and Aldrin had to endure the physical trauma of their own armor. The A7L extravehicular mobility unit was not a tailored uniform. It was a multi-layered, pressurized straitjacket. In the absolute vacuum of space, the suit inflated to maintain life-saving pressure. Instantly, the flexible material became as rigid as an inflated car tire, actively fighting against every single joint movement the astronauts attempted. Bending a knee, reaching for a tool, or simply gripping a rock required deliberate, exhausting physical force just to overcome the suit's internal resistance. Inside the polycarbonate helmet, the astronauts were completely severed from the external universe. Sound cannot travel in a vacuum. There was no whistling wind, no crunching of dirt beneath their heavy boots. They were plunged into a terrifying acoustic isolation. The only sounds in their localized universe were the deafening, mechanical roar of the oxygen pumps circulating air from their portable life support systems, and the frantic, echoing rhythm of their own breathing. They were essentially trapped inside mobile, anthropomorphic submarines, separated from instant death by merely a few millimeters of rubber and woven fiberglass. 2 Act 2, The Atmospheric Blind Spot and Optical Vertigo. Once they descended the ladder of the lunar module, the optical reality of the moon launched an aggressive assault on their visual cortex. Because the moon lacks an atmosphere, there is absolutely no atmospheric scattering. On Earth, airborne dust and moisture scatter sunlight, softening shadows and creating a hazy horizon that provides our terrestrial brains with crucial, subconscious depth cues. On the lunar surface, those cues were violently erased. The sky above them was an abyss of absolute, infinite blackness, even with the sun blazing like an unfiltered welding torch directly overhead. Furthermore, the shadows cast by the lunar module and the boulders were not shades of dark gray, they were pools of impenetrable void. Stepping into a shadow meant stepping into a visual black hole where the temperature instantly plummeted by hundreds of degrees. Without a hazy horizon to gauge distance, the human brain constantly miscalculated scale. Massive craters miles away appeared like small dips just a few steps ahead. Boulders the size of houses looked like pebbles. Their spatial awareness was completely hijacked, inducing a severe, disorienting optical vertigo. They were navigating a high-contrast alien geometry that aggressively defied human logic. 3 Act 3, The Silicate Razors and the Cardiac Redline. The ground they walked on was equally hostile. Lunar regolith is not like terrestrial sand, which is smoothed by millions of years of ocean tides and wind erosion. Lunar dust is created by eons of micrometeorite impacts that shatter basaltic rocks into microscopic, jagged shards of silicate glass. This dark, abrasive powder clung to everything with a fierce static charge. It coated their boots, smeared aggressively across their gold-plated visors, and threatened to degrade the critical, airtight seals of their spacesuits. Compounding this environmental hostility was the psychological guillotine of the mission timeline. Houston had granted them a brutally short window to execute their surface operations. Every second was meticulously scripted. They had to deploy a passive seismic experiment, set up a laser-ranging retroreflector, plant the flag, and collect core samples, all while fighting the exhausting resistance of their inflated suits. NASA's biomedical telemetry recorded the silent toll of this pressure. During the rapid bulk sample collection, Armstrong's heart rate spiked to a dangerous 160 beats per minute. He was physically redlining, sweating profusely inside his liquid cooling garment. Houston's flight surgeons watched the monitors in tense silence, fully aware that if an astronaut suffered a cardiac event on the surface, there was absolutely no medical intervention possible. He was pushing his cardiovascular system to the absolute limit under the crushing weight of a relentless, ticking clock. Outro CTA, The Flesh vs. the Void. When Armstrong and Aldrin finally hauled themselves back into the cramped cabin of the Eagle and sealed the hatch, they were physically depleted. They unsealed their helmets, and the cabin immediately filled with the smell of spent gunpowder, the distinct, acrid odor of the abrasive lunar dust clinging to their gear. They had survived an environment that fundamentally rejected biology. The traditional historical narrative focuses exclusively on the triumph of the planted flag and the immortal footprints. Yet, the raw truth of Apollo 11 is that true exploration is rarely glorious in the moment of execution. It is exhausting, terrifying, and profoundly uncomfortable. The ultimate cost of leaving a permanent mark on the cosmos is the willingness of fragile, biological creatures to endure the absolute limits of physical and psychological torment. Brief pause, 2 seconds of deep silence. Does understanding the painful, claustrophobic reality of the lunar surface make the achievement of the Apollo astronauts seem less romantic, or does it make their quiet endurance infinitely more inspiring? Challenge the sanitized version of history and drop your thoughts in the comments section below. If you are compelled by the gritty, unvarnished physics and the hidden psychological battles of human space exploration, anchor your presence to this channel by hitting the like button and subscribing. The universe is a beautifully hostile frontier, and we will never stop dissecting the raw truth of navigating the dark.